the mill room here. So this is where we sort of first come into contact with the malt. When it's supplied from the maltings, we get 3 deliveries a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Normally we get the supply of malt, about 28 ton loads 3 times a week. We process roughly 80 to 85 tons of malted barley every week. At the moment we're transferring malt from the malt storage bins, which are next door, up above the mill. It's going through a cleaning machine or a dressing machine called a destoner, which takes out any rubble and some of the dust, so that we just put clean malt in here, and then we're ready to mill it through here. So
you're getting it like this?
Yeah, so this is what we get in. You want to try it? This is, and as you'll know well already, this is the malt that we're using this week. So this is a crop, a 2017 crop called Concerto. The phenol level in this week is about 52 to 53 ppm, so it's within that mid-range band. Try a little bit of it. You want to try a little bit? Eat it. It's like a smoky muesli. It's quite tasty, actually. A little bit. So I'm just going to do it. Bernard, you try. So when you smell it, you've got that sort of smoky. You can smell that the phenolics on it. So remember, all the phenolics or the smoky flavour is on the husk on the outside of the grain, and the sweetness you're getting there is more of the starches inside as you're chewing into it at the moment. So what we do with the mill is we've got the grain here, so we have 5 tons of it into the malt hopper here. So when we're ready to mill it, start up the motor. We start to drive the 2 sets of rollers. There's a top set of rollers and the bottom set here. Theory is here that as the grain passes on slowly from the bin, it bursts open in the top set of rolls, and then we grind it to the consistency that we want on the bottom set. So from the mill we get this. This is a grist that we use. So a combination of 3 things. The grist contains husks, which should be about 20% of the volume. Grits or middles, which is small starch granules that you see here. A little bit of fines husks there, about 70% of that, and around about 10% flour, roughly. So there's a standard. That's about what you would call the standard grind. We like to grind with a little bit more flour, up to about 12%. But it all depends on your mash tun and how the drainage goes and the efficiencies from it. So the grist, the malt that we're using at the moment, we're trying to get at least 405 litres of alcohol for every ton that we process through the distillery. So when the load comes in from the maltster, it has a certificate with it that tells me the extract fermentability, the predicted spirit yield, and what we should be getting from it. Loads of other things on it as well. And we've got to check it in to make sure that's within our specification, because once it comes into the distillery, the only way out is through the process. So we want to get it right when it comes in. So we check all that. So we're trying to get that for every ton that we process this year, and that's very variable because you're looking on a growing season. So you're looking whether it's a good spring, whether it's warm, damp, wet, cold. So the malt can change very slightly year on year. The most important thing for us for the flavour and what we're going to look at is the phenolics. So it's to get that right, because when you, at this level, 50 to 55 ppm, when you drink you tasted Ardbeg 10-year-old, in your glass, the Ardbeg 10-year-old has about 21, 22 parts per million of phenolics. So there's 50 on it when you start to process it. So if you don't get it right at the start of the process, when you drink it in 10 years' time, it's not going to be right. You have to have that level on it at the end. So yes. Yeah, we're looking 18 to 20%.
Yeah.
Our mash tun's quite old. New mash tuns nowadays can grind with up to about 16 or 18% flour. We couldn't cope with that, simply because because it would just clog up the mash tun.
Is it because of the heat level? Do you think that the bit larger proportion of husks?
No, it's mainly more for the drainage, because when you add it into the mash tun, your mash tun makeup depends on your ratio of water to grist as well. So we have quite a thick mash here because it works better with a thick mash. So we have something like 3.8 litres a kilo through the mash. So sometimes you can have slightly more than that, but it works good for us at that because the enzymes are like a thick mash. So each plant has a little bit of differences between each one. So that's what we work into it. So it really depends on that. So we like to check each one. We've got a little sieve box here. So every time we do a milling, the guys take a 100-gram sample into the sieve box. Here, that's how it works. 100-gram sample in the top into here. Give it a good shake. 60 seconds, 1 minute shake, whatever way you want to do it, but roughly. And then you separate out your husks sit in here, your grits in the middle and the flour on the bottom. Then weigh it out onto the weigh scale. It's about 95% accurate, but it gives us a good idea what we need to do for doing it, because it gives us an idea, because as we change a batch, or sometimes week by week, every load that come up is not exactly the same, so the moisture might change. We're allowed between 4.5% and 5.5% moisture, so a load that comes into us at 4.5% will grind differently than a load at 5.5%, so you have to reset your rollers. So we like to try and get everything we can out of it. It's very expensive making whiskey out here, and we canny Scotsmen, we don't like to waste anything, you know, so we've got to try and get as much out of that as we can. So we're opening and closing the rollers as we see fit on it.
Adjust the rollers often?
Not too often. At most maybe once a week. You don't want to do it maybe more than once a week. It really depends on your loads coming in. They're quite consistent, but you do get slight variations on them. So the main thing is if you change variety, if you go from concerto one to something else, because the grains can be different. They can be longer, wider, bigger, maybe slightly harder. So it depends on the modification of the malt. So.
How often do they change the type of barley?
And not so much. Maybe you might have that maybe once a year, maybe not at all. But sometimes, but you just have to just monitor that as well. But it's just looking at it as every load comes in. We tell the lads to look at this. They get a delivery note with it, and we look at it and say, right, okay, we need to look at this. We'll need to shut the rolls for that load. We'll maybe need to open them a little bit for that one. So we keep an eye on it. So.
Two questions for you about phenolics. First, is there like an industry standard when they're giving it a rating of ppm? Is there a standard where it's reflective of the malting when you're getting it versus what you get in the bottle after 10 years? Or
no, for us, the standard and the way they measure it is they have a certain standard, usually by HPLC, which they can measure the different phenolics. We measure 7 different phenolics, and we use the figure that we call totals. So we measured guaicals, phenols, cresols, and they're all at some are slightly larger percentages than others, so we add them all up, and that gives us a standard that we're looking for.
In the malt or in the bottle?
In the malt, because that's what we've got to do. We've got to get it a certain level within the malt, because we're processing it now. We're not making that whiskey for today, we're making it for tomorrow, so we need to know that that phenolic level is right when we get it in.
You don't put it on the bottle, but if you did...
We don't put it on the bottle, no.
If you were going to do something like that, would you say 55 ppm or would you say 20 ppm?
It really depends what you wanted to put on it. You could put this whiskey was distilled using malt at 55 ppm. You know, in the bottle. You know, it's not a standard that's put on any of the bottles that you use.
Also with spent grain, giving that to as feed to cattle, is it an issue because it has phenolics in it, or do farmers take it just?
No, they take it the same.
So it's not an issue to the cows.
No, not an issue at the moment. No. So no, they're not complaining. So we have a company that sorts that for us, because not all the spent grain that we have here stays on Islay. With the distilleries producing at quite high levels, some of ours, most of ours is shipped off. We don't have enough cattle to eat all the draft. We don't have enough anymore, so a lot of it's shipped off to the mainland, and that's just part of it. But there's not an issue at the moment.
Any plans of making a bioplant?
Yeah, we're looking at lots of clothes at the moment. We've got to look at that going future as well. So we're looking at issues in energy and fuel supplies and all that type of things. That's part of what we're looking at over the next within the expansion plans as well. So there's a lot happening on the site. Loads of things getting planned at the moment. So this is our mash tun. We're just waiting on the next washback to be available. As I said before, our bottleneck is the still house, so our mash tun sits idle for about 2.5 hours between each mash, because the stills don't process the mash rigor. So when this is available, you can see we've emptied out just now. You can see the floor of the mash tun is like a sieve, it's like basically a filter plate that's on the bottom. So below that, about 100 mil below that, we've got the actual floor of the mash tun, which is about 10 100 mil pipes in diameter which feed off it to take the liquid, and that goes into a baffle and then into the bottom of the underback here. So when we add in the grist, which is in here at the moment, we've got 5 tons of grist in there. At the back of the mash tun, we've got the first heating tank, number 1, contains 17,500 litres of the third water from the previous mash, which is we call the sparge water. So it's held at 68 degrees centigrade. So when we're ready to mash in, we open the valves here in the mashing machine, which is here, Steele's masher, pump the water through into the mashing machine at 68 degrees centigrade. We open the slide from the grist conveyor here, and that mixes along with the hot water and automatically takes it down to 63.5 degrees centigrade. And then we add that into the mash tun at that temperature. It takes about 20 minutes to add it all in, all the water, all the grist. We have different temperature controllers on here because temperatures has to be very, we have to be very careful with the temperatures here. We don't want to go above 65 degrees or below 62.5 degrees, so we mash in this fine band. When it's all in there, we then give it a standing time. We let it sit for 10 minutes, so allow enzyme reaction to take place. It also allows the mash to settle on the plate, so you can imagine some of the liquid, when it's added in, goes through the plates. The solids sit on the plates, and we let that settle, because as we want to pump the wort, we're looking for a clear wort. We don't want a lot of sediment in the wort. So after 10 minutes, we then open a large valve in our underback, allow the liquid to drain from the mash tun into the underback, and then we pump that through the little heat exchanger that we pass down there. So hot water in at one end, cool it down to 18 degrees centigrade, and then pump it to one of the washbacks for fermentation, where we then add the yeast, and then the cooling water goes back into the heating tanks then to be reused for the next water as well. So it takes about 3.5 hours to pump that first water off. That's the most important one, because of that band, you can do a lot of enzyme damage if you mash in too hot, so we have to be very careful with that. So that's all pumped to the washback. 3.5 hours later, we add the second water on, another 8,000 litres at 80 degrees centigrade. Pump that through the heat exchanger, cool that down, and also pump that for fermentation. So we're fermenting about 23,000 litres in each batch. There's about 2,000 litres contained within the draft with every mash. And then we add our sparge water, which is our rinsing water, just to rinse out any residuals that are left, and we pump that back into the heating tank to become the first water for the next mash. So that's about a 7.5 hour process all the way through. Then the draft you see here, porthole opens up, that arm forms a scraping blade, turn it anti-clockwise, and then a compressor blows it out into a storage tank. So when we've got about 35 tonne of it, we then load it into a truck, and then it's shipped off to the mainland for animal feeds from there. So in here is very important. As I said before, when you go into the still house and you see the copper pots and the shapes and the magic that they do in there, but they will only get out what you put in from here. So if you don't get it right in here, you're not going to get it right in there. So for me, I come in here every morning and I look at the mashing sheet, and just by looking at the originals and final gravities and what's been happening in here, you can tell how the process is going to be. So it's quite important, this part of it as well. And under here, loads of pipe work, so we have a very strict cleaning regime as well. So after every mash, we flush out with hot water. Twice a week, we clean, sterilise lines. So we've got a regime that we go through here to keep that consistency all the time. So
is it a full lauter?
It's a semi-lauter. Semi-lauter.
I noticed that it is cast iron. Is this actually a rebuilt rig?
This was what happened back in 1999. The mash tun was in quite poor condition, so we lifted out all the old tumbling gear that was in the inside, and we slotted a new mash tun inside it. But we kept the cover because it's much nicer than stainless steel. Exactly. So it's part of the old cover from 1961. This mash tun.
Because that was the old rig.
But the men still control it. We operate here with 5 crews of 2 people who operate the process, and so the boys in here today, Alex in here today, he's mashing this week. Next week you'll be doing distillation, so they swap around. There's a bird flying about in here, is there? Yeah. So they're all cross-trained, but they control the mash tun. Okay. It's semi. They have to control the flow rates. They mash in, so they're looking at controls and how everything's done here. So it's still a lot of manual control in here. It's not, you don't just press a button and it goes. They have to look and adjust flows and settings and make sure the mixing yeast temperatures are okay. So there's still a lot of contact with the process, which is good. Like to see. So we'll probably look in this one first. This one here is the one we're waiting on to go to the stills. So it's finished fermentation. So we're just waiting the still to become available. This is one that's just been filled, probably about 2.5 hours ago. So you can see it's still quite still at the moment. You can see the yeast on the top there. So it's just.
It never comes higher than that mark.
It will come up maybe 200 mil if you're lucky.
But I mean, you never fill them up to like...
We never fill them up. No, you leave freeboard in for fermentation, but... so that's the level that we work here. So that's 23,000 litres that's in the washback. You can see they're about 5.5 metres deep.
Yeah. It's all Oregon pine.
Yeah, so we've had that Ardbegs a long time. That helps a lot with the character and the spirit. we get a slightly malolactic fermentation. We can never really sterilise them because all we do is at the end of every fermentation we hose them out with water, we steam them for 15 to 20 minutes. So there's still bacteria in the wood. So we control it that way because we need that for the flavour profile, so it gives us a sort of soapy, oily mouthfeel, and also adds a sweetness into the spirit as well. It's what we're looking for. So this one's here. So this is in its lag phase at the moment. So another couple of hours and we'll start to see it moving a little bit. One behind us is finished. It's about, we have a 56-hour fermentation time here for the first half because we only have one wash still. So each washback supplies 2 distillations. So we empty the first half into the wash still, start to distill it off. The second half gets another 5 hours fermentation time. So it's around about the 58, 59 hour mark in fermentation.
You don't need any switcher blades?
We don't need any switcher blades. No. We rake, because what we do with our process, we don't rake through our first water, we rake through the second. So when we're doing that, we don't get a huge amount of fermentation here. So our head comes up maybe a couple of 100 mil, maybe 300 if you're lucky. You get the odd time. It depends, again, it depends on the malt, and sometimes we can come in and you can sometimes see the lids sort of bouncing a little bit around a little bit on the lids, but normally we don't have any problems with that. So in here we have 6 of them. Each one is about between 10 and a half and 11 hours between each batch. For each one of those we take off roughly about 2,000 litres of alcohol. So at the end of the fermentation, the fermented wash strength here is between 8.5 and 9%. We do what we call high gravity mashing here, so our OGs are quite high. Original gravity is measured here, 1066, 1067, and a final gravity of about 1 to 2 under. So we're attenuating hopefully about 68, 69 degrees. 68 degrees gives us an average yield of about 405, 406, so than here. So
405, 406.
yeah, so at the moment, so we were getting better than that, a little bit steady. So yeah, somebody like to try this? Wash down the coffee. Oh, Brad, you seem up for it. This is the wash still here for the first distillation, and the spirit still for the second, and the little purifier that you see at the back, which we talked about earlier on, when we recycle some of the vapours, which gives us more reflux during the distillation and adds a bit more complexity into the spirit. So the wash back is ready to do. We pump 50% of it into the wash still, into here. Most important thing in here, when we're in the still house, we have a 1-to-1 balance system. So we do 1 milling, 1 mash, 1 fermentation. We've got 2 of these wash distillations, 1 spirit distillation. So we've got a complete balance running all the way through the system. The stills here, they're what we call lamp glass shaped. Very important, so they give us lots of reflux. We have the pot in the bottom to show that goes to the head, and then the swan neck at the top. So when we fill the wash still here, up to about this level here roughly, inside the still we have stainless steel pans that we pass steam through. So we basically boil in 2 big copper kettles. Put the steam on to it, and it's about 80 to 90 degrees centigrade. Some of the alpha vapours will rise off along with some water. The vapours up here, close to the neck, onto the head of the still, and over into the condenser. So it's going in there around about 8.5%. When it starts to distill off into the safe, it's what we call low wines. At the start of the low wines run, it's around about 45% ABV, and then 5 hours later at the end of it, it's round roughly down about 1%, which means it's about 0.1% in here. So that gives us an average strength in our low wines of around about 21 to 22% ABV. It runs into a wooden receiver which is under the floor downstairs. Once we've taken all the alcohol from it, we empty the still out, preheat the next half of the wash back coming in, and do the same thing again. So that's about a 10 and a half hour time to run through.
From start to finish,
from the wash back and pump for the first time here, before we get the second half in and distill, it's about 10 and a half hours. That then gives us enough low wines then to charge the spirit still, along with the head and the tail from the previous spirit run as well. And that's what keeps us going on the consistency. It's just the way our system works. So this is a little tail back here, which is what holds us back in the process. So this is the low wines coming running through here. So it's coming off here, we're about halfway through the low wines run. The moment should be around about 20% back. Got running down through the blue pipe here, which runs back down. There's a receiver underneath. So anything that goes into that receiver is redistilled. We're also running the tails of the spirit still, so we've taken the middle cut off this one already. So it's running also down into here. When all the distillation is finished, we then we'll empty the two stills out, we'll wipe the pot ale from the wash still, start a new wash distillation, and then we'll pump all this into the spirit still. That means this receiver's ready to take the next wash back plus the next top and tails for the next distillation from here. So with the spirit still, when it's recharged and coming in here, it comes in here around about 75% ABV. So it's gone from an average of about 22% in here. When we added the head and the tail from the spirit still, it's about 25, 26. So when it distills in here, it comes in about 75% ABV. So once we've got it running nice and steadily, we take a 10-minute pour-shot once, quite short. We've got a really good balanced system here. So after 10 minutes, we're ready to make the middle cut. So we still take the sample. We check the clarity, strength and temperature, do a little test, and then we simply turn the handle and it starts to collect the new make spirit. So it goes on spirit here after 10 minutes, and it will run for around about 5 hours. And it will go on spirit around 75% alcohol, and we'll distill it right down to about 62.5%. So that's the middle cut for Ardbeg, 62.5. And then we turn it back off spirit, and from 62.5 down to 1 is the tail end of the run. All runs back in here.
That's why they take extra much peanut stuff.
Yeah, we do so. So the purifier, as you see at the top, as it's distilling off, some of the heavier compounds are collected in the pot. There's always liquid in the bottom of that pot. So when we're distilling off, there's always a liquid trickling back down into the still. So we're sort of reboiling a little bit. So it's giving us more complexity and add a little bit of spirit as well, so that's very important. We're the only one in Distillery Manager who has this. I think there's only another 2 in Scotland who actually have it, so it's quite different. That's been here for a long time. Some of the older pictures we got at one point many years ago used to sit outside on the roof. It's been there a long, long time. So when you're tasting Ardbeg, you know it's very smoky, but when you taste Ardbeg, it's what I call the sweet blend in. When you first taste Ardbeg, you've got that smokiness, but you've got a sort of sweet, slightly citrusy note to it as well. Affects your tongue, initial salty sweetness, the creaminess that's flowing into that lovely oily floating in it. So you're building sort of steps in it. So the purifier is quite important, and that's what gives Ardbeg its purifier. This is the level of the new make spirit when the boys are filling in the filling store.
Oh, okay.
So this is allows us all our receivers here are high level. Kept on so we don't overfill them by accident. There's a lot of safety stuff running in the background that you don't see.
Okay.
So when that goes down to about 1-2%, boys will stop filling and then we're ready to pump. We're filling here on Friday again. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday we fill into it. And we never go higher than 80% in this receiver here. It was 80% this morning.
You use the measure stick here.
Measure stick, yeah, you can see the dipsticks, yeah. That's the amount of liquid that's in the tank. There's another one here for this tank as well, so it's still quite old fashioned.
What's in here?
What happens, all the low wines and faints, when we're ready to charge the spirit still, we pump it from here into this receiver here, and it's gravity fed into the spirit still. It's the old system that they have here. So that it uses a holding vessel, and that one's used to measure the amount of liquid in the receiver so we can check the dips. So we're looking at the levels and the amount of liquid we've got all the time, and it's just for consistency in the product that we're looking for all the time. Then on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the new make is collected in here. So we collect 6 runs. Monday and Wednesday we distill 6 runs, and a Friday we have 4 runs ready to fill into cask. And if you're looking, we like to think that we probably make whiskey exactly the same way every day. You know, we get it exactly spot on every single day, but probably impossible. But we get it very, very close. So when we go to fill, we take 6 distillations at a time. Measure the alcohol in it, reduce it to 63.5, and that gives us consistency that we're looking for all the time. So we talked about the phenolic level and the strengths, so we get that consistent all the time. So.
But it's always the same